the audio rates.
Look how much Miller's come back into play. Exactly. Miller's just like chopper. He's not on second and...
Hello everybody and welcome to the TX Jordan GR86 series here live at the Tanso Racing Group on the JPB YouTube channel. It's a pleasure to be along for the first time live in this series. It's round 4 at the Circuit de Lédenon in France. And it is, as I say, the first live round. And the first round, unfortunately, that James Profit is not alongside myself, Ewan and Larry. Instead, it's Bradley Dalton who will be giving a bit of a introduction to this series, I suppose, Brad. It's a circuit we don't know a lot about, and based on what we've seen from the drivers so far, they may well know very little about this circuit as well. Very new to the iRacing service, very seldom used outside of French national series, means that a lot of these drivers who are not French don't know this circuit very well, and we've seen plenty of incidents so far in this practice session. What we've got ahead of us is an evening of drama, I'm sure.
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody, depending on where you're at in the world. It's this is going to be an interesting one for me. Ewan, you already pointed out it's going to be interesting for you. This is a track I've driven a handful of times, and I can't remember where I've driven it, but I know I have because I own it and I have it. But yeah, the drivers don't seem to be having the best time with it, which has been kind of catching my attention as we've gone through practice, and the times are fairly spread out from our 17 cars that we have here on the field. 5.3 seconds, the gap between 17 cars. And of course, we do have John Kenny, who is showing considerably off the pace, but I don't know if that's representative. We're watching from the blimp here on Mark Brown to see how Mark Brown gets along here and goes through, and seems pretty comfortable. Seems like he's not having too bad of a time going through, but even then, Mark Brown, the fastest through practice, we've still seen him make a number of errors here.
Yeah, but that's what practice is for in some ways. It is about finding the limits and then going over them and then making sure you don't do it again when it gets time to the race. I wonder whether... Oh, we haven't really got enough time. In qualifying, I promised to show you a full lap, and we'll go on board with someone and have a look at their lap when we get to qualifying, because that's only a couple of moments away. As always, lone qualifying in this series, and so we don't normally get to show it because... Or we haven't done so far because of the pre-recorded rounds, but because we're live, we thought... Yeah, let's give it a go. That's going to be a big crash, and that's going to be a not valid lap, you would argue as well, at the end of practice for whoever that was. In terms of the championship standings, by the way, I'll just tell you where we are in the moment. Scott McFall is leading the way in Pro. He's currently second in this practice session, but he's first in the championship standings by 23 points, ahead of Ryan Dudley and Daniel Wareham. Dan Wareham is third. Ryan Dudley is seventh overall, but fourth in the Pro class in this practice session, to give you an idea of their pace. Scott Brown is the runaway leader in Pro-Am. He's leading by 54 points after only 3 rounds, which is extraordinary, really. He is only third, though, in the Pro-Am class in practice so far. And then in Am, the most numerous of the classes, Terry Atkinson is leading, having taken over from Adrian Hadfield by just 3 points as a result of the second race at the Nordschleife. practice just ended there before I could grab their times, but they are both here. I believe they are indeed, and they'll be battling for points again in what's looking like it could be a 2-horse race in the AM standings this season. There's a look at the practice results, looking for Hadfield and Atkinson. There they are, just 3 attempts separating them in 12th and 13th. That very much says all you need to know about the season as a whole, really, so far for those two. They have been very, very close indeed. Out onto the circuit, though, go the drivers for qualifying. A 10-minute session at its maximum, but they are limited in the amount of laps that they've got as well. I'd imagine, Brad, I mean, you've driven this circuit, as you mentioned. This circuit, I've noticed, contains a sort of thin band of tarmac to the left and right in some quite key areas as well. How easy is it to just go over the 4 wheels over the white line and avoid off tracks? Can we say that anytime you see someone do that, they're getting an off track, or can you take the mick a little bit with the track limits?
iRacing has been very, very kind to everyone that the track limits are a little loose here, and you do get a little bit more given here on this track in terms of the track limits. It gives you a little bit more sort of politeness that you can kind of tip all 4 wheels off in some areas, and you won't always see people get dinged for track limits, for example. Like right there, if you go a little bit wide, you may not get dinged for track limits. It's a track that really you want to use the most that you can, and I think for these GR86s, it's going to be a very, very good run, and it's going to be nice for them to be able to kind of conserve. They can give a little bit less sort of oomph to it and still get away with it.
That's very fortunate for everybody. Let's have a look at a full lap, though, as we watch Lee Rylands at the moment. He's the first driver out there at the moment. Very long first corner, which is split up into 3. Turns 1, 2 and 3, all really just one long left-hand bend. Then a much tighter turn 5 after the kink in the straight, turn 4. That's what you're talking about, Brad, in terms of running out wide and getting away with it. That's perfectly legal around this circuit. Down on the brakes again into a slightly less tight hairpin, although it is still very much a switchback through turn 6. A little bit more within the white lines on that occasion. Then a blind turn 7, although it's not really much of a corner. And another plunge downhill again in towards turn 8, which is almost like Aqua Minerale at Imola, to be honest. Then you get to 9, which is... that is too wide. We're talking about you can get away with it. That is certainly too wide for Lee Rylands, and he goes round. After that, you get a pretty simple turn 10, which isn't really worth thinking about too much. Then a pretty tight hairpin at 11. Almost slalom course, if you like, if you're... a watcher of skiing, down the hill through turn 12 and 13, and then another right-hand kink, which isn't even corner numbered, and then turn 14, which I would argue is one of, if not the most important corner on the circuit. Here it is down that corner, by the way, not named for some reason. Then this corner there, the left-hander, not only because it gets you onto the longest straight on the lap here, but it is uphill as well, which means that any bad run will be further exacerbated by gravity on the exit.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really important to hold on to all the momentum and run, especially in that third sector of the track. That's where I think if we see any drivers really find advantages, it will be through sector 3 here. I want to check back here with John Kinney, who is making his run around. Seems fairly consistent, and that is the one thing I can say about John Kinney. He seemed off the pace in practice, but is just consistent and smooth. Like, isn't really pushing, no big major dramas as they go through. But all the drivers are really, really going to have to be careful right here through turns 1, 2, and 3. This is where we've seen the most incidents, and it's drivers just trying to carry more momentum than the grip of the tires will allow, and that's been what's sending most people off early on.
Incidents, as I mentioned before, maybe as a result of a lack of experience. This circuit, as I have mentioned before, is not really used outside of the French National GT Championship, which has been coming here time and time again, and the French F4 Championship as well, which has been too. I think both coming here since the 90s. This circuit, though, opened over 50 years ago now, though. And so it is fairly well established, just over 3 kilometres in length. Quite a good length, actually, I think, for this kind of car. It's pretty short by most standards, but actually for the GR86 series, the TX Jordan GR86 series, it's actually quite a good length of a circuit, I've got to say. We're just around 25 kilometres northeast of Nîmes, which, if you're not familiar with French geography, is right in the southwest. Should be very... the southeast, not southwest. Right in the southeast of the country, not a million miles away from the Alps and Nice and all of that down there. So it is very hilly, as you can see. This circuit, well, it's the first thing I mentioned to you, Brad, pretty much. It is built on a hill, effectively. If you sort of draw a line through the middle of the racetrack, you notice the track map sort of almost sits on its bottom, if you like, and it's sort of set up nicely straight. If you strike a line straight through it horizontally, that's pretty much where the hill is. And so the way this track goes, you're going up the hill on the way towards the line. Then as you go around turn one, you go back down the hill for the next corner. Then uphill on the way out, downhill again, uphill again towards the line. It's a roller coaster, to be honest, because of the way this circuit is built, literally on a singular hill, and they really make use of it.
Yeah, I personally like that, kind of using the geography, because it just adds that other level of challenge to the track. It's not, since we're in France, I can compare it to another French track, Circuit Paul Ricard, which is very, very flat, and the challenge comes from where that track is so flat. The challenge for me on this track is how up and down and around it goes, and I really like getting these onboards with the drivers, because you can see just how up and down and hilly this track is, and it produces its own challenges, because when you're hitting the brakes for a corner, you're not just hitting the brakes for a corner, you're hitting the brakes and also fighting the weight of the car going through. And these GR86s, while they are fun cars, they're not exactly the most nimble. It's not a Formula 4 car. They are very much akin to, well, I won't even say they're akin to a GT4, because they're kind of the baby GT4. You drive these cars to step into GT4 and iRacing. So you kind of got to keep that in mind.
And on another sim I used to drive, it used to be called a GT5, this level of car. Not really a thing, but you get the point. Over the line for the first four drivers, and I can report Scott McFall has found something extra on his final lap, and he's gone to the top. A 1 minute 31.9 is good enough, I think, for pole, as the others couldn't improve. Dan Wareham did improve a bit, but not enough, and Mark Brown couldn't improve at all. He made a mistake on his third and final lap, and so he should be third at the end of the day. I'm not sure your ability in French geography, Brad, but would you believe it? Paul Ricard's actually not that far away geographically from this circuit here in the southeast, a little bit further west is Paul Ricard. But the mystery to me is how they've managed to, as you say, and you're right in pointing out, Paul Ricard is pretty much entirely flat. Not quite like Manicourt, which really isn't. If you put a Mars bar on the floor, they'd suddenly they call it a hill. It's very, very flat indeed. But for some reason, Paul Ricard is not very far away from this very hilly region of France, and it for some reason, and indeed you have to climb a hill on the way in if you've ever been. Not that I would imagine anyone has, and. It's a real mystery to me how they've managed to make it so flat. But anyway, it's a slightly tin pot track anyway, isn't it, really? So much runoff on the exit. Anyway, thankfully we don't have to deal with that so much in iRacing. Meanwhile, Dan Wareham continuing around the circuit. He's the only one out on the circuit. Everyone's pretty much done their lap times here, and that is not a problem because they are limited in terms of laps. Wareham, I think, is just using this as a bit of extra practice.
Yeah, and honestly, we saw Wareham be the fastest person during the practice session, so it kind of doesn't surprise me to really see him trying to just put in some extra time here, especially if you have Scott McFall, who has just pulled out a time out of nowhere that is considerably faster. I mean, I would just be smooth and consistent through here, and just make sure you know your track, because qualifying times are one thing, and it is something to have the qualifying time and have that great run through in qualifying, be top of the timing tables, but you got to follow it up in the race, and you've got to make it through in your heats and all the way forward. And, that's, sometimes we see that the fastest driver that can put in that blazing lap can't keep it consistent all the way through the race. So, I like watching Daniel here, who is just being nice and smooth all the way around his laps. He's been consistent lap after lap after lap.
He is, and that's the name of the game. As the time really ticks away now, where plunges uphill. I bet it's steep as well. I don't know the actual measurements, but I bet it is a steep climb. Always computer screens and TV monitors and whatever you're watching this on at home always flattens out a gradient. And so when it actually looks bad on TV, it really is. Wareham knows that that's the last lap he will do, and so sends himself into a spin and tries to catch a drift, which he does okay at. Not quite, though. The checkered flag flies, and that will be the end of the session. And as I mentioned, Scott McFall's relatively late lap will put him on pole. We'll have a look at the grid as they get themselves onto the starting straight for a standing start, of course, for the start of the first race of the evening. It is Scott McFall ahead of Dan Wareham with Mark Brown in third place. Peter Duke is fourth ahead of Scott Brown, then Ryan Dudley in the top six, which will be important, of course, if they want to make the reverse grid. Neil Kennedy seventh, but third in his class, with Lee Rylands, Dan Forster and Adrian Hatfield, the AM pole sitter, on the rest of the top 10. Alan McCain is 11th ahead of Tim Walters, with Terry Atkinson and Shane Bellinger rounding out the 7th row. John Johnston and Scott Bell are next ahead of Anthony Jones and John Kenny, who round out the grid. It is 18, but it's going to be an important start for absolutely everybody because it's a standing start, and we've seen that provide so much drama so far this season.
I love standing starts. I love standing starts because it's something that you just have to practice and be good at. It's not something that you can really sort of get away with not learning. You just have to be good up front and be good with it. Scott McFall could have the chance, if he can nail a standing start, to run away with it. Daniel Warham has the chance, sitting in P2, depending on how this goes, could jump on the start and get away with it. We'll see how this goes as they set up, but it looks like we've got almost everyone on the grid ready to go here, so we'll get ready for a nice run of 20 minutes of heat action here.
First race of the day will be 20 minutes. Adrian Hatfield and Alan McCain, by the way, are the ones we're waiting for. Hatfield gets onto the grid to complete row 5, and McCain has got about 20 seconds to do the same as well. He's really got work to do here. He wants to get inside the top 6, which is for the all-important reverse grid, which I'm sure he'll want to be a part of. There he goes, pops onto the screen with about 10 seconds to spare, and so we can go racing. For the very first time in the TH Jordan GR86 series here at the Tanso Racing Group, it's the Circuit de Lédenon for the first time, and we're underway. Big wheel spin, I'm afraid, for the Pro-Am leader Peter Duke, and he's immediately being challenged by the championship leader Scott Brown on the outside, on the way in towards turn 1, with 3 and 4 wide in the midfield as there's contact made for the Pro-Am lead. Brown and Duke duking it out indeed through the first couple of corners. Duke on the inside will take the place though, maybe. It's still side by side as they run down the hill for the first time into turn 5. It's going to be a bit wide for Peter Duke, and he's not going to be able to hang on to the place. Scott Brown takes the lead in Pro-Am after a lively start in the middle class.
Pro-Am with a very, very hard battle that's no! And contact around goes Peter Duke. Oh
no!
Oh.
And straight into the side of him goes Atkinson. That looked like Terry Atkinson to me. The championship leader in AM, I'm afraid, getting off to not a very good start. Tim Walters and Alan McCain, by the way, also have dropped down the field. I'm not sure whether they have problems on the opening lap as well, but we'll just see the opening lap out before we really see any replays. Dudley and Rylands go side by side through the latter portion of the lap as Neil Kennedy tries to get involved. Now he goes for a spin. Thankfully, this time it's to the inside of the circuit. He can get going without getting collected by anybody else.
Tell you what, it was interesting during practice to see how drivers were kind of having issues on their own, but now that there's other cars around, you get that little bit of a love tap.
Oh, Wareham!
Oh, and what has happened to Wareham?
Dan Wareham's gone for a spin at the all-important 14th corner. Oh, and he's been collected by Peter Duke as well. I think it was Duke anyway, who was trying to, maybe it was Bell actually, but I don't know. Wareham gets back going again. A word for anybody surprised at what we're seeing at the moment, by the way. Damage is not on in this series, so don't expect to see anybody limping to the pit lane with a broken car. Damage is off, and so it does allow these people to stay in the race as Bellinger gets back onto the circuit, straight into the path of John Johnston after a big, big slide. Coming through the middle goes Terry Atkinson, who's actually made a very good recovery in the AM class. He's now going side by side for second indeed with Johnston.
He is going to put the battle here with Johnston through and around, and he's got it. And now you watch the battle back behind. That is going to be Shane. Big dive up the inside that you see up on the inside, and that is going to be Peter Duke with a little bit of a tap there. It goes around Alan McCain there, and back in the background, that is indeed going to be Tim Walters. And as soon as these drivers decide to set things up and breathe for a second, we'll take you back, Ewan, and we'll get a replay of that first lap because there were plenty of moments in lap 1 that we can look at.
Yeah, Duke is really siving his way through the field at the moment, and you can be sure he'll want to after the opening lap he's had. It's been a difficult start to the race for the man who qualified on pole in the Pro-Am class. Meanwhile, Johnston and Atkinson may have come together. There's Johnston going he's in the background. That was Atkinson going slowly on the apex. There's Johnston having made contact with him at the end of the second lap. There are the leaders, though. It's Scott McFall who's converted that lead into a good start here. Mark Brown in second position ahead of Scott Brown, who is the leader of the Pro-Ams, followed by Ryan Dudley and Lee Rylands, the top five, with, at the moment, Dan Forster in pole position for the second race if things were to end right now. But what a lively start it's been. What a lively opening couple of laps.
Yeah, the drivers have been very feisty early on here. I do want to get a replay of some of the moments that happened here in lap 1. This is going to be with Ryan Dudley right off the start. We got something off the start. Somebody missed, and here we go. Everybody goes. Look at the amount of wheel spin that everyone gets off the start as they get going and underway, and then right into turn 1. It was just absolute carnage as it started. There was no time for anyone to breathe. It was immediate big slides, side-by-side contact all the way through the field. And back in the background, what did we have? Well, we had, I believe that was Alan McCain that spun. This is going to be a moment with Neil Kennedy coming around, and it looks like Neil just overcooks it. Tap to the inside. That is him going through. This was Alan McCain earlier in the lap trying to go around, and you're going to see he puts it 3 wide through the middle, and there's just not enough room for that to work. Big tap there and goes
Walters.
around.
Yeah,
and
that will be Tim Walters, who's in this race. Michael Walters not with us in this race. There's side by side between Walters again as he tried to get down the inside of Alan McCain there. It went around on him and he recovers. Currently running down in 15th position, Tim Walters. This is what happened to Johnston and Atkinson. So Johnston sees the opportunity, goes down the inside, but it turns straight across Atkinson there. Difficult to know who was quite at fault for that, actually, but Johnston is the one who loses out more. He's now down in 17th position as we're running at the moment. So that's taken us about a lap to go through all of those replays, but that just shows you what went on through the first couple of laps.
There's been plenty of action all the way up and down the field that's still going on. It looks like Shane Belanger has had it off here.
Yeah, he did at turns 1, 2 and 3. So dropped behind the likes of McCain and Bell. Alan McCain has made up plenty of places without even having to do anything here, really. Daniel Wareham continuing to make his way back through the field as well as we go back to the Pro-Am leader, Scott Brown, trying to hold back Ryan Dudley. Difficult to know really what the point of all this is for these two. Dudley, I wouldn't imagine he's going to be able to catch Brown in the other Brown, that is, Mark Brown, in the remainder of the race. But he will want to hang on from Rylands. But then again, if he gets past Scott Brown, he'll only end up behind him again when the reverse grid is set for race 2. So I'm not sure how enthused he will be about overtaking the Pro-Am leader just for the moment. But it's a lot calmer up here inside the top 6, 7, 8 or so. They've had decently clean starts to the race as opposed to the second half of the field.
Yeah, everybody up here in the front, since they've kind of built up the little bit of a gap, they've been nice and relaxed and kind of just holding on and going and really just fighting about their own. And as I say that, Dudley trying to look up the inside here of Brown, just wanting to get a pass because the person he's really fighting is right up there off the front edge of the screen there. You could just see him. That is the other Brown, Mark Brown. He wants to get up there and try to have a battle up for second place. But the big thing is he's got to get around this Brown first, who is, I mean, just defense masterclass, doing everything possible to put that GR86 in the way. And look at Brown, Dudley here, trying to just find a way around Brown. He looks to the outside, he looks to the inside, he's going to look to the outside again, just trying to find something and isn't able to.
Yeah, trying to find space anywhere he can get it. Now he's right round the outside to find himself down the inside at turn 8 and 9, which, as I said earlier, reminds me of Acqua Minerale at Imola, really, only with slightly less jeopardy and a slightly, well, I suppose it is just about similar through turn 9 as well. But all of this battling is allowing Lee Rylands to get involved, and Dan Forster as well. There's a difficult predicament here for the likes of Scott Brown, who will want to keep that 2-car buffer between himself and his nearest rival. However, it is also pretty precarious because Dudley is so close behind him and attacking him. There is Alan McCain, who is, I think, just been off the road and is back behind Shane Bellinger again.
Yeah, something happened with McCain. We'll get a quick replay and see what that was. And it looks like he's battling through here and trying to make a run. And it looks like just kind of gets lots of help around. Who is that, actually?
Who was that he was alongside?
Johnston. Was that? Yeah, it was
Jones?
Anthony. Yeah, Jones.
Yeah, Anthony Jones. There you go.
Just kind of gave him some
Well, it's
help.
not ideal. Not ideal, really. Well, difficult to know whether the car on the outside was coming across, or the car on the outside, was not giving enough room, whatever. But it was not good news, I'm afraid, for McCain, who's well down the field now. Unfortunately for those guys, especially the pro drivers who are down there at the moment, it's not really about making the reverse grid anymore, because I think they will accept in themselves that getting a top 6 overall is going to be near impossible now. However, it is changing your starting position for the second race, and so you will want to make up places you can, even if there are no points on the line, because you're not battling drivers in your class. There is still something on the line, because it improves your starting position for the next race, which of course is based on, if you're outside the top 6, which is based on the finishing order of this race.
Yeah, it's all about continuing that battle through, because you've got to think ahead. You can't necessarily think about where you're at right now. You do have to think about, well, if I get ahead and going into the second heat, where am I going to be at for the second race? Am I going to still be there, or am I going to be up ahead? How's the reverse grid, and how do the points affect? So even if the person around you isn't your class, still battle, still push, and even then it can just be learning experience, and it's just good fun. That's the big thing, is realistically, it's all just good fun. Even if it's, you're sitting there and the guy in front of you isn't in your class and you're still battling, you get a moment like this with Dudley and Brown going around, and then there we go, and we find it, and all of a sudden we've got another little bit of a race on our hands.
Certainly do. It just doesn't die down, does it, here? Dudley is, I think, going to get away now as a result, but Brown is going to be sweating here. Forster is the main worry. I think Lee Rylands being a bit of a buffer is going to be an advantage to Brown just for the moment, but it's not especially ideal given the proximity of Forster. Here they go over the hill and back down again in towards turn 8, which isn't really an overtaking opportunity. It's so fast on the inside there, and then there's such a short shoot to turn 9. It makes it very difficult. Tighter exit there from Rylands. Is that him getting out the way of Forster? No, certainly not. He's not going to roll out the red carpet for the prime driver, I wouldn't have thought. He will still, I think, Rylands hope that he can get past Dudley here and maybe take third in his class. Don't forget, points are scored by class and not overall. So if Rylands can't get through here, you might see him at the end, letting the 2 Pro-Ams go through and getting that pole position himself by finishing in 6th position.
And really, you couldn't blame him if he does it. That would be a very, very smart strategic move, and it may just be a case here if he just wants to follow a driver with the same livery as him here for the moment. He just wants to stick behind because he knows that this is going to make his life a little bit easier if they can just follow each other around. We'll see what happens, and as this race develops, 8 minutes, 45 seconds left to go in this race. It seems like, for the most part, everyone's gotten very stable in the last few laps. I haven't seen anything go off in terms of wrecks or off tracks, and I think everyone's kind of gathered it up and have settled in from that race start. And as I say it, there is an off track from Rylands trying to keep it together, and thankfully I think he does keep Forster behind.
Yep, he does. Out through the left-hander and back up over the hill, back down again, dipping down again, looking up the inside. This is aggressive, but no. Rylands can't force his way through. Brown says, nope, you're not going through there. And it would be quite weird for him to give so much space at a corner that requires quite so much commitment. Here goes Dan Forster as well. Difficult to know what to do if you're forced to hit. Do you wait for Rylands to do the job, or do you try and overtake Rylands yourself and give yourself a good chance of getting the Pro-Am win away from the championship leader here? Very difficult to know which of those attitudes to take. We ride on board now with Forster. Into turn 14 they go. Need a good exit through here, and he's got a good one. Exacerbated, of course, by the uphill. Rylands not quite getting the run that maybe he needed, but it seemed to work out okay for him on the other side. And still, he hounds Scott Brown, and still he can't get through as Dudley gets ever further away in third.
Yeah, he is trying his best. I will say that, riding on board with him. I mean, he's carrying momentum. He's really conserving the speed. He's doing everything possible to try to find some way past. And he just can't seem to find it here at Dan Forrester. So he settles in here, and I think he's going to be settled in for the long haul. And we go back here with Peter Duke. Peter Duke has had some sort of a moment as he tries to get back going. And right as we do that, Dudley and Brown, here's the big charge. This is going to be Dudley around the outside on Brown. Can he make it stick?
Well, I'm surprised that Dudley was under attack from Brown there. I'm surprised that Brown gave him any sort of grief at all, actually. But there you go. He certainly did. And Dudley had to hang on to third place despite being nearly a second ahead by the time they went over the line last time round. Bit wide again there from Dudley. And Brown surely going to have another good run on him here on the way in towards turn 10, which is pretty inconsequential. And then turn 11, which certainly is. Here he goes. He's not going to get anywhere near. And is slightly relaxed as a result of Rylands being not so close behind him. 6 minutes to go means that we've probably got 4 more laps here. Yeah, I think we probably have. As over the line goes Scott McFall now with almost exactly 6 minutes to go. It will be 4 more laps now for these drivers to sort themselves out, and Rylands has got a great run here on Scott Brown. He really won't want to give this place up, will Scott Brown, but he can't take a defensive line because he will lose the slipstream to Dudley. In towards turn number 1 they will go, and he's looking again. And he still can't find his way through. This must be a little bit on the frustrating side now for the pro driver.
Yeah, Rylands at this point is just looking for some way to get his way around. If you're Lee Rylands, it's literally at this point, it's just move, please. Give me a chance to get through and let me try to make a move here. And I'm fighting for position and you're in my way. I saw the wipers turn on and I wonder if he was trying to flash headlights on accident and hit a wrong button as he snakes his way through. They snake their way through the middle part of the lap here. I do want to go back and look at what happened to Peter Duke here, what Peter Duke's moment was, if he had help or if this was just 100% on his own. And I have a feeling that this is just...
Oh no, technical.
Yeah, something happened with Peter Duke there, having his own little off track on his own. It was a
technical.
Weird one.
I'm afraid. It was weird. Almost like one of those pop-ups maybe, appearing on your screen. Always used to be a thing. It really widely talked about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, but doesn't seem to happen to people anymore. Meanwhile, side by side between Rylands and Brown, and finally Lee Rylands might have his position as he gets down the inside at turn 14. Brown's going to hope for the exit here, but he's going to go wide, and here goes Forster. This could be side by side for the Pro-Am lead, not quite. Forster's got a run though. He's just falling back a little bit in the slipstream now as Brown pulls away. He'll be using the slipstream, of course, of the driver in front just to tie him along on the front straight. Here they go into the very long looping left-hander to begin this lap. Brown now under pressure for the first time in this race, truly from somebody in his class. First time since, I guess, Peter Duke was going side by side with him in the opening part of the lap. But this is much more serious. This is in the final 3 laps, and this is definitely for the win in this race.
Look at the way the cars, as they bottom out on the hill there, they actually bounce from how stiff the suspension is and how stiff the body is. It's very interesting to see because it's not something I feel like we see a lot. And it's not something that you typically see happen. And these drivers seem to really be harnessing working that here at the bottom of these hills. Watch them as they kind of bounce through. They come around. At this point, Forster needs to find a way to just get to the back of Brown. He seems very smooth, very consistent. He's just not close enough there. And even then, it almost seems like Brown is being held up by Lee Rylands and trying to get back around him here. Will they start battling again is my question. Is Rylands going to be able to get up to Dudley before the end?
Oh, that was not a good line for Forster. Wide on the way in, wide on the way out. And that was possibly a fatal mistake for Forster if he wants to win this race. Out of the final corner they go. That might well be settled now. The other advantage he's got, and I know this is not a heavy slipstream circuit, maybe like the Nordschleife was, although there wasn't too much slipstreaming going on there, too many slipstream games. It very much is a case of when Brown is in the slipstream there of the pros in front, surely it's got to be even more difficult for Forster to get through. Added to the fact that he's already finding it quite difficult anyway.
Yeah, the GR86s are an interesting car because they're very, very true to their stock GR86, but they have just enough additions that you have to consider aero to a degree. It's not something like in Formula One or in GT3 or in hypercar that it's going to make or break your run, but it is something you need to be aware of and you need to consider, because it can give you just that extra couple mile an hour advantage as you go through if you're not careful of it. So it's something interesting to see, but it's not something that's going to make or break your race. But it is something that I think these drivers are aware of and need to be aware of, as Rylands runs a little wide here.
It certainly does. I don't think Rylands would be too worried about this. Although, again, because there's such a gap there, I do think he might be worth giving up 6th place here, because, as I said before, you score points within your class and not within the overall structure of the race. And so what you could do is get pole for race 2, but we'll see if he decides to do. Maybe I'm just a bit cynical. I'm not suggesting that these guys would do that on purpose. I'm just suggesting that's what I'd do, because maybe my morals are a bit misplaced. Meanwhile, Brown goes straight through to 4th place, and Rylands loses a place. That was natural, to be honest. That was just an honest mistake through turn 14, as far as I could tell. We've spoken before about the run and how that's affected when you make a mistake in that final corner.
Yeah, that final corner is so instrumental to this entire first sector of the lap. You got to nail that final corner time and time and time again, and it's kind of just eventual. It's inevitable that somebody is going to mess up that final corner. Unfortunately, it was Rylands in the situation of battling with Brown and Forrester and trying to catch Dudley. I think just maybe overdrove it a little bit, got a little wide, but here we go through in, I believe, what should be our final lap, as Scott McFall is coming around here near the end of a lap.
I believe it should be. You never know with iRacing sometimes. I've done plenty of races where the laps, where it's given us another lap after the one where you're supposed to finish, but anyway, we'll see what Scott McFall has shown as he goes over the line here, whether it's the white flag or the checkered, as the battle for 4th does peter out a little bit towards the end here. It's been the main entertainment of the second half of the race, but further up front, it has been Scott McFall's day. The championship leader in Pro wins the first race in Lédenon as he wins race 7 of the championship. A great performance from the championship leader again in Pro, and it's the championship leader in Pro-Am who does the business as well. Scott Brown led the championship by 54 points at the start of the day. That gap is only going to extend over the likes of Shane Bellinger and Neil Kennedy, who are the closest ones to him, who are here today. And in Am, it's a somewhat redemptive win for Adrian Hatfield after he lost the championship lead in the second race of the Nordschleife round. He's taken it back by winning here in Lédenon, although he only finishes 1 position ahead of Terry Atkinson, who was right there with him all the way through, although he's 9.5 seconds back also, still finishes in 2nd place.
Yeah, and then you have Jones coming across the line, running with Kennedy there. They're running side by side. Different classes, but again, in the overall battle, still running through. Just a couple of AM drivers that are left to come over the line, and then that will set us up here where we could start getting ready for round 2 here around this beautiful French track that's honestly given a lot of battling. The drivers are getting very feisty, and I'm really, really liking how these GR86s are handling.
Yeah, I've got to say I don't like driving them, but I do like watching them. So it's a good job we're here and not on the circuit, that's for sure. Let's have a look, if we can, at the race results, just as confirmation while warm-up is going on here. And we'll have a bit of an intermission, of course. At 7.5 seconds seems to be the margin. It was indeed for Scott McFall ahead of Mark Brown. It was Ryan Dudley joined them on the podium. Scott Brown won in Pro-Am 4th. Lee Rylands has got better morals than me and finished in 5th. Didn't give up 6th place to go on pole. That will be for Dan Forster. Neil Kennedy, Dan Wareham just missed out with Adrian Hatfield winning in Am. Peter Duke got back to a top 10 with Terry Atkinson in 11th. That's Shane Bellinger, Anthony Jones, Alan McCain all within inside a minute of the winner. John Johnson finished 15th ahead of Tim Walters, who was the final driver on the lead lap. Scott Bell crossed the line, you will have noticed, just behind Scott McFall 2 laps down. John Kenny dropped out fairly early on in that race. So, entertaining, I've got to say, and it's your first impressions, really, of this series, Brad. It's been a fun season, I've got to say, to take part in so far. Still got plenty of racing to go, by the way. Lédenon is only the fourth round in 9 that we've got going right the way to the early part of September. So we've got plenty of racing coming up at plenty of different venues, but it's been a fun season to do so far, and that was a good race to start off with. Now time for the reverse grid.
Yeah, I really, really love reverse grids, and someone might be asking, well, why do you enjoy that? It just adds a little pizzazz, and sometimes you have drivers that, just have that bad round 1 that, you get them back up front in round 2, and it just adds extra life to the battle, and it gives everyone just a nice little break as well. You get this nice little mid-session sort of warm-up, cool-down area where everybody can sort of sit and relax and just reflect on what they did in race 1. And sometimes you just have a bad race 1, you get taken out by an early wreck, you get knocked back, and then come back into race 2, take it all the way back forward. So I'm really excited to see what happens, and I'm a big fan of the GR86s. I think they're a nice step up from the MX-5s, and I think they're a nice blend down from GT cars. So they give you just enough that you don't feel like you're overwhelmed if you're jumping from an MX-5 into a GT4 like some of these AMs might be. But they also give you enough that if you're stepping down from a GT3, you don't feel like you're driving, the 5cc go-kart at your local rent-a-kart track as, some of the pros might be thinking. It gives you that nice blend.
Yeah, certainly. As doesn't seem anybody's taking the option to warm up, really, does it? There's nobody out on the circuit. It's not like we're purposely not showing you anything. We literally can't because nobody has bothered to drive. I mean, it's always a bit of an argument, a bit of a toss-up, isn't it, really, between do I want to drive again and warm myself up for the second race, or do I just want to recover from the first one, stand up for a second, walk around and shake the arms and legs out a little bit and then sit back down in the rig again? It really depends, in my opinion, whether you're in the rhythm or not. If you've had a bad race, you certainly get out, but if you're in the rhythm, you almost don't want to move because you don't want to change anything and ruin the good form that you're in.
What I always personally did in these warm-up sessions that kind of split between sessions is sort of pace laps. You don't necessarily go all out and try to set, hot lap times, but don't just sit there. I tried to keep some sort of blood flow going and just sort of pace around. Now, drivers might disagree with that, but for me, that was how I kept in the rhythm. So that was always my go-to, was just to pace through, maybe run, 15 seconds off of the race pace, and just that way, if there was anything that I didn't like that I did in race 1, I can sort of work that out and say, I kept missing this apex, and reaffirm in my head, here's the apex. Or if there's anything I did nice in race 1 that I liked, I can, reaffirm that in my head. But I also wasn't putting forth full effort over and over and sort of, wearing myself down. Because this, even though it's called a warm-up session, it truly needs to be sort of a cool-down reset session.
Not a terrible idea, actually, just to go slightly below your full-out pace. Certainly don't want to be concentrating and trying to score best laps, I suppose. That might wear you out a little bit. Then effectively you've got to think about it like you're doing a full 50-minute race at that point with 20-minute first race, 5-minute warm-up, then a 25-minute second race, added in qualifying as well. It's that's an hour of driving full on if you are silly with it. But then again, I suppose some of these guys will have done endurance racing before, will do it in the future, and an hour in the car, maybe not this car, but an hour in the car is not a stretch really for the best drivers. So we'll see. But evidently, nobody's taking your advice, Brad, and they're all staying in the pit lane, and they will be getting ready for race 2 instead. So that's what we'll do as well as the session ends now. The starting grid, of course, will be pretty much the results from race 1, but top 6 will be reversed. Starting, of course, with Pro-Ams on pole. As we've seen before, Dan Forster will be on the pole position, ahead of Lee Rylands, who will be in second place. Then it will be Scott Brown in third, Lee in fourth, Mark Brown in fifth, and Scott McFall in 6th. After that, it's going to be pretty much the way they finished in race 1. But I would argue that they didn't quite finish in the order, maybe based on pace. Neil Kennedy and Dan Wareham will share row 4, ahead of Adrian Hadfield and Peter Duke, rounding out the top 10. Be Terry Atkinson and Shane Bellinger on the 6th row. Then in 13th will be Anthony Jones ahead of Alan McCain, John Johnson, Tim Walters, Max Scott Bell and John Kenny. As we get things underway, race 2 at the Circuit de Lédenon as in the TH Jordan GR86 series by the Tanso Racing Group. Not a good start for Lee Rylands, I'm afraid, as he gets beaten by Scott Brown and by Ryan Dudley off the beginning of this race. Mark Brown goes round the outside as well through turns 1, 2 and 3. Can he make that work? It's going to be pretty tricky as Peter Duke goes for a spin. It's his second incident on lap 1 in 2 races, I'm afraid, as down the inside goes Dudley. That goes wrong for him too. Mark Brown takes advantage of it as Dudley goes straight into the back of the pack. Lee Rylands goes around as well, I'm afraid. Disaster for some of the pros who started at the front.
Big moments that will have race-changing implications, because it's going to be very, very hard for these drivers to be catching back up, as we have Shane Bellinger, who is off into the gravel yet again here and out of the way as we go through. But I tell you what, it's a big mix-up here into race 2. This is going to be the challenging part. You've got to nail those race starts, and sometimes you just get unlucky and it drops you back. And unfortunately for Peter Duke, it is second verse, same as the first. Drops back. Tim Walters is back as well. I mean, big moments through, and we see battles still going on.
Scott Brown has lost the lead in Pro-Am because of the reverse grid, and he's lost second now as well to Neil Kennedy, or did briefly. Kennedy now back behind him again. Oh dear, as Brown and Wareham make contact. That was Dan Wareham, who for the second race in a row is off at turn 14.
Oh, and that was a hard shove from Dan Wareham there. Just kind of sent him out of the way and got him through. But after lap 1, it is Dan Forster in the lead here with Mark Brown in P2, and then McFall, who is going to be here in 3rd place.
And going straight down the inside here, not waiting around, looking to go back-to-back here at the Circuit de Lédenon. As into turn 5, he's going to be on the outside. This is where we saw the big incident, of course, on the opening lap. And again, we will wait a lap or so to get those replays because it is still lively out there on the circuit. Brown defending again from McFall, and for the moment successfully. In the meantime, Dan Forster getting away with the race lead, and it's side by side meanwhile between Dudley and Hadfield. Adrian Hadfield leading for the second race in a row in Am.
Yeah, and they continue to run through. This is big battles that are happening, and if you're the Am driver, you kind of just, I don't know if you want to be battling too aggressively, but you also need to remember that competition is not that far back. So you got to be careful, because these Pro and Pro-Am drivers have been feisty race 1, and they've been feisty the start here of feature 2. So they are not letting back. So if I'm Hadfield, I would probably just make sure I'm on my P's and Q's.
Yeah. Oh, McFall is side by side with Brown here on the way in towards, I think it's into the final corner. And now on the way out, it looks like they are indeed side by side here. Mark Brown and Scott McFall is just about alongside. He was looking to the inside at turns 1, 2 and 3. 1 lap ago was Scott McFall, the championship leader and race 1 winner. He's doing it again. This time it's a much tighter squeeze, but he's just about making it work. Brown goes a bit wide to try and give him some room, but he's hanging on remarkably well. He's just about going to run out, I think, as they go into turn 4. He bobbles over the curb. He's still alongside on the inside, and that's the place to be at turn 5. Here he goes, round the outside for Scott McFall, and that should give him the inside at 6 and the position as well. Here he goes. Oh, he's having to go through the middle of the road to defend again here as Brown cuts back at him. Maybe he'll be back alongside by the time they get to 7 and then turn 8, of course, but not quite, I don't think. Scott McFall has fought his way through in a great battle between the 2 leaders. There's the contact. Mark Brown goes for a huge slide. How he saved that, I've got no... Oh, he didn't quite save it. He just about goes for a spin and gets clobbered by Scott Brown in the end as well.
Oh, unfortunate. He held on to it. He held on to it. He held on to it even more. And then when he finally thought he had it, it let go of the rear grip. And then unfortunately, he was just right in the middle of the racing line. Nothing he could do there. But Scott McFall with great racecraft all the way through that lap to battle up and get up into P1 overall in class. And now, if he wants P1 overall, he's just got to chase Forster here and see if he can get past him, which with the pace he has, it would not surprise me to see if he can catch him fairly quickly.
Well, that was quite a dramatic battle indeed. Scott McFall, though, has got a great chance now to go back-to-back here, as he did, I believe he did it at the North Cypher as well. Don't quote me on that. No, I've slept 5 times since then, so the memory is fading slightly. But yes, it's been a successful season so far for Scott McFall. There's no doubt about that. And for Scott Brown as well. I mean, the gap between him and Dan Forster is very, very large. But for Brown to be in second right now, only second to Forster, who, by the way, as far as championships are concerned, is quite a long way behind him. Yeah, that's a successful place for Scott Brown to be, and I don't think he'll mind sitting here in second place at the moment.
I don't think he'll mind at all. Now that things have almost figured themselves out here, once we get this battle sorted, and this is the battle between Rylands and Brown, I do want to see how this one ends, and then we'll go back and take a look at lap 1. And take a look at that Mark Brown action that happened as well, because there was a lot that we missed on lap 1 because there's just so much going on. With 18 cars on track, it can be pretty hard to keep up sometimes. But we'll go back here and see if we can catch exactly what happened.
Yep, let's see if we can have a look at the action. That's the opening couple of laps gone. No, actually, I say that Scott McFall is about to challenge for the lead here. I know this may be a almost formality, but it is worth having a look at here. Champ Forster will surely let this one go. He knows that with over a quarter of an hour remaining, well over a quarter of an hour remaining, he cannot hold him back for that long, and it's all the more sensible thing to do to allow the Pro Championship leader, the Race 1 winner here at the Circuit de Lédenon, to go through and take the lead away from Forster. That's exactly what's happened. So, yeah, finally now we've got a semi-quiet moment.
Yeah, and we'll go back here and let's check out some of the action from the start. This is going to be the start here with Peter Duke. This was kind of what kicked everything off. Peter Duke going through, and it's a good run. This is through the first couple of corners, and then the rear end grip just breaks. I don't know who that was, the green car that just absolutely avoided hitting him there. And then a little bit further back, it was Tim Walters yet again who has a big moment here, and is going to be going through, and Tim, I think, just unfortunately back in catches out. Not a lot he can do, goes around, and again, great defensive driving from the cars ahead. And then Tim Walters a little bit further along the lap, that same spin. Lee Rylands has a moment here early on. See if we can catch what this is. Tim Walters is spinning behind him, and this is that moment with Rylands that really sort of set things.
Yeah, so that was Dudley who Dudley got spun around, and in trying to rejoin really quickly, he went straight into the side of Lee Rylands, which wasn't very kind of him, and so that sent Rylands around. This is the actual incident with Dudley himself. He was down the inside here, and I think he gets turned across by whoever that is. It's the 258 of Scott Brown. It's the Prime Championship leader. Yeah, I think he's been turned across there, I'm afraid. Dudley, he gets back going again very quickly, but straight into the side of Rylands, who ends up down at the back of the field where he still pretty much is, although he has recovered quite well, back into the top 10 again. Now this is Mark Brown. It's a great battle with Scott McFall just preceding this, but then a big slide, a great save initially, and he just hits that curb, and as you said, just as he thinks he's got it, he hasn't. It's absolutely smacked. That was by Scott Brown as well, and the green car, I'm not entirely sure who that was, but maybe Neil Kennedy, who did, as you mentioned, did the avoiding of Peter Duke as well on the opening lap. So he's had a pretty eventful race so far. Speaking of eventful, I think Dan Forster has been off while we've been looking at those replays, because he is suddenly well behind Scott Brown, and now in a battle with Neil Kennedy, who previously was with Scott Brown. So the Brown lead has been handed over here, and this is what happened. It's fairly innocuous place to go off, I've got to say, turn 6, but just got on the power too early, and he'll be livid with himself for that error, I think.
Yeah, that's one of those preventable errors. You've really just got to kind of keep your head in the game all the way through. But sometimes you have small moments like that have big consequences. And unfortunately for Dan Forster, he's now 1.6 back here from Brown and needs to just try to make his way back up. And unfortunately for him, he has a friend of Neil Kennedy that is right behind that's going to start trying to catch him and try to pass him for second place.
Yep. So that's going to add some unnecessary pressure to the day as Mark Brown gets back through on Alan McCain there. I mean, Brown is recovering as well from his incident earlier on in the race after his battle with Scott McFall. Although the race leader wasn't involved in the actual incident itself, he was very close by at the time. And that's an important pass to make for Brown, although that might well be it now for him. Third place in the pro standings. So far, we've got all race 1 winners in all 3 classes winning in race 2 again here. Remarkable symmetry going on there. Especially remarkable, really, for Scott Brown, who was really quite a long way away from the lead. And, of course, Scott McFall, I suppose, who's overtaken 5 drivers to get to where he is. But, Adrian Hadfield is doing a good job too. He's got a good 5 seconds or so over his nearest rivals. It's the championship leaders all winning at the moment, both races of round 4. Very ominous for everybody else during the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a big question mark on the rest of the season is who can challenge these 3, because they look very smooth, very consistent, and very fast. So someone's really going to have to kind of step up and say, you know what, I would like to be the one up front and kind of push things forward, which I think is very much doable. It's just a question of who as we get a pass here. This is Adrian Hadfield on the inside. On the outside, it is Daniel Warham. And Daniel there is just cruising around and gets the pass on the outside. I think Hadfield isn't going to cause any unnecessary issues because he is in the lead of the AM class and doesn't want any issues, anything to compromise that today.
No, he doesn't want any trouble. So Wareham is going to set his sights looking forward here. As I mentioned at the start of the day, he is trying to chase down Scott McFall, only 23 points behind him. It's pretty close, and that's a mistake from Alan McCain that's going to hand him a place. Alan McCain goes wide. Adrian Hadfield moves up a place, in fact, to 8th overall, but unforced error really for McCain. I couldn't really see how that really happened, but it was just an individual error.
Yeah, it looked like just off the corner of the screen there, we didn't get a good look at it, but I think really he just locked his front tires. I think that was just too much brake pressure trying to get the car to go in. And, one of the fundamentals of racing is you don't brake and turn at the same time. And I think that's kind of what he did. Was I think he was too much on the brakes and trying to turn too hard. And the tire just locked up and said, I'm not doing that. Unfortunately, it cost him a place, but thankfully it didn't cost him anything more than a place. He went a little wide, but then he caught it here, and now he kind of settles in and just gets back on the chase.
Yep, he's, oh dear, this could be 3 wide in a moment. Real stack up between Hadfield, McCain and Rylands, and there they go. 3 wide over the line. This is something you don't see very often at all around here, but Lee Rylands makes his way through, not only dispatching of the AM leader, but also of the Pro Challengers too. So McCain drops to the back as Dan Wareham gets past Mark Brown. That should be a good battle between these two. They're slightly misplaced compared to their speed, I think, but they are both evenly matched, I would argue. And they have a good battle for 6th place there. Meanwhile, Forster has caught Brown. And I'm not sure whether that was induced by an error from the championship leader, but Dan Forster is back through into the lead.
Yeah, I'm not sure what caused that either. We'll find it here in just a moment and get a replay of it. So that way we can see exactly what caused that. But now we do have the big battle of Forster, Brown, and Kennedy that is on our hands here. And let's see if we can find exactly what forced that one through really quick. Here is what should be a replay, and it looks like it started all the way on the main stretch.
Well, I'm surprised in that case. Brown did his best to defend, but didn't entirely shut the door. And Dan Forster gets his way down the inside. Didn't look particularly convincing for a while there, but eventually the corner just run out for Brown. Oh, they get stuck together. Oh. Wow, that was close for the two of them going around. Brown's still on the inside here, so I'd be impressed if Forster made it all the way around there. And well, he was slightly gifted some room on the outside that maybe Brown could have been a bit more forceful in closing there. And so, down the inside goes Forster and into the lead. Well, I thought all the lead battles were pretty settled, actually, when I was looking at the order a couple of minutes ago, but it looks like we've got a race on now in Pro-Am.
Yeah, it looks like we've got the race on in Pro-Am. I think Pro is pretty well settled here as you look at McFall and Dudley's gap of 9.3 seconds and climbing, but I will draw your attention here. I'm going to come back to Adrian Hadfield here in the AMs. He's chasing down McCain, but I do also want you to look at that gap between him and Terry Atkinson. That gap has been fluctuating a little bit off and on here, and it looks like it is closing, even though it's 7.5 seconds with just under 10 minutes to go. We'll see if that battle happens. If anything happens with Hadfield battling with McCain, that could cause an interesting moment for us, as it looks like this is going to be a pass here for P2 and AM, and it actually looks like Terry Atkinson can hold on to it, but up ahead, you now have Brown and Forrester going back at it, and Kennedy is just there kind of saying, you know what, you two have your battle, and I'll be here to pass both when the time's right.
Yep, he certainly will. And Wareham closing on them both as well. I imagine Mark Brown will be here by the end of the race too. So it could be a really congested battle if indeed they slow themselves down by going further here. Scott Brown again gets a good exit compared to Forster, who didn't, I'm afraid, through turn 14. Will he look to the inside at turn 1? It's a big ask to try and do that, but no. Kennedy again closes too. This is a lot closer than what we saw a lap ago when they were actually beginning to just stretch out a little bit. Well, the elastic has come back again now. Brown applying all that pressure again, but he's in the unenviable position of being in the middle of a group of 3, with Kennedy also applying pressure of his own. So it's difficult to know where to look when you're Scott Brown at this moment. At the moment, he continues in second position, holds on. And Forster as well hangs on to the lead. The bad news for him, though, I believe he's still got 6 laps to go.
Yeah, he's got at least 6 laps to go here. Possibly could. I don't think he'll have 7 laps to go, but definitely 6 to go as it stands. And he's just got to drive like he's never driven before for the remaining 6 laps. And don't forget, they already ran an entire Heat 1 before this race, so he's on the tail end of what's essentially been 50 minutes of racing, if not more, as we go through, because I don't remember how many practice laps Forrester had put in. And so he is really going to be feeling it here at the tail end of this session, and he's just got to drive this car as hard as possible and get this 86 all the way to the end here as we go, and he's doing fairly good with it. He's being consistent and smooth. The big key is he needs to keep that up for another 7.5 minutes.
It will indeed be 6 laps to go, by the way. So Scott McFall is going to get to the line just in time to squeeze in another lap, which is bad news for Forster, certainly, but could be good news for those behind him, as Dan Wareham now catches up. This is probably the worst possible situation for Wareham, because there's no race after this. Doesn't matter where he finishes really now, as long as he stays ahead of Brown, but the very presence of this battle in front of him means that he is less likely to hang on to that position ahead of Mark Brown. Because they're fighting so fiercely just up ahead of him, means that he will surely lose time when he gets here, and he'll either have to overtake them, which is an ordeal with risks in its own right, or he'll have to sit behind them and lose time and have to defend his own position here. It's really not ideal for Dan Wareham.
Yeah, and I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't know which one I would pick if I was Dan Wareham. I can't tell you which one is the lesser of the two evils to pick, because it's kind of 6 one way, half dozen the other. You really just have to be sort of on your toes and ready to go on either option, but we'll see how it plays out across 6.5 minutes to go as it sits, and Brown is getting closer to Forster here, and I think he might get this position back before the end, because it looks like he's just got a little bit more in the tank maybe that he can put out of this GR86 to keep things going.
Yep. Oh, over the line for the leaders again. 6 minutes to go. Normally indicates 4 laps, but Scott McFall so far ahead of everybody, it's going to be 5. And as I mentioned before, that's bad news for Dan Forster here, who's looking for a victory.
If he can get it, that's the $1 million question. Can he make it stick? Can he get all the way through to the end? That is really what we're looking for.
Tim Walters, I think, has gone off and is out of the race. Scott Bell, by the way, is out also, as Kenny also didn't begin here in this race. Now, what's happened? I actually can't check anymore. Apologies if I froze a couple of moments ago. That was on my end. That was my fault. But also means I've got limited access to my screens at the moment. So I can see what you're seeing. So we're mostly okay. Let's have a look at what happened down into the final corner. Pretty awkward moments out wide, and Walters just disappearing. That looked like a disconnection there.
Yeah, that was a weird little moment there for Tim Walters. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but pretty unfortunate to see that that's how the day ends here as we go back through. And it does look like Peter Duke is having a good little scrap back in the back here at the end of the pack, as Brown and Kennedy and Forster and Wareham are all following each other. These two have been swapping positions back and forth time and time again.
Well, based on speed, you'd shown in qualifying, certainly you'd argue that Peter Duke should be able to see off Shane Bellingham quite easily, but Bellingham is up there. Bellingham. Watching too much football, sorry about that. Bellingham is one of those challenges in the championship, is right up there. One of those drivers who has been at all the rounds so far, and so as a result, is up there. Meanwhile, Dan Wareham alongside Neil Kennedy now, and Kennedy's defending, doesn't want this to happen, but he hasn't got a choice. Dan Wareham goes round the outside of turn 5, and that gets him 5th place. And, well, pretty important as far as securing his pro podium goes, but pretty damning for Neil Kennedy, who's only got 3 laps now for either Wareham to overtake the 2 ahead or for him to re-overtake Wareham and then catch the leading 2 all over again.
Yeah, I think that's the nail in Kennedy's race, and I think Kennedy knows it too. I'm curious to see if Kennedy starts putting more into it or if Kennedy just kind of hangs out with the pack here. I'm not sure which way this will go, but meanwhile, up front, look at this. Scott Brown finally up the inside of Forster here. Can he make it stick? He's going to run it wide, and that's going to open up the door for everyone to get back in the battle.
And contact, Brown goes round! Oh, Brown goes round. The championship leader in Pro-Am was going for the double here at the Circuit de Lédenon, but it's not happened for him. Forster is going to end up battling with Kennedy now, who takes the lead. Wareham goes through on both of them after the side-to-side contact with him caused Brown to spin, and now it's opened the door for a race winner to step into the void here. Will it be Neil Kennedy, who's on the inside into turn number 1? He's certainly taken the lead, and that is quite astonishing. Forster has to tuck back into line, and that was an unexpected twist with just 3 laps to go.
Everything had been going so smooth and well for everyone up to that point, but you see the door open, you have to go, you run it a little deep on your own, and now you're trying to defend the inside. I don't know if there was contact.
There sure was. I'm absolutely 100% convinced of it, and this camera angle will show it right here. Bang, right there. There's contact. I'm absolutely convinced of it. That camera angle does make me doubt a little bit more, but I am absolutely convinced of it. 95% sure, we'll say. Just leaving that slight percentage of doubt just in case. But that, I mean, you don't spin there on your own. Certainly not with that amount of viciousness, I suppose. And I don't really know whether he'll be the angle to probably decide or not. Brown goes deep himself, don't forget, and then there's for sure contact there. So is that Wareham's fault for not giving more space on the inside, or does Brown run up into the side of his competitor? Well, we'll mull that one over for a moment, but the actual battle in the present is just as exciting. Kennedy here having to surely go on the defence again. He took the lead more decisively in towards turn 1 a couple of laps ago. Now he's having to hold it through here. Forster so close to the back of Neil Kennedy at the moment through the opening long looping left-hander, as meanwhile Brown's into the pit lane. He might have run out of fuel anyway. Here goes Kennedy trying to hang on to the lead, but Forster's had a remarkable run off of turn 4. Into turn 5 he goes, right round the outside where Wareham made the move on Kennedy. He's also done the same here down Forster and taken 4th place. That was remarkable, and he might be on his way to a Pro-Am victory here at round 4.
I'm going to say a very, very simple quote here to summarize that entire pass. That was just simply lovely. That was a glorious, glorious little pass that he made stick there, and now he's just got to run away into the sunset. I don't think Kennedy's going to want to let him do that, but that's what he needs to do. But Kennedy gets a better run here coming up the hill, and we'll see how this handles in for the end of this race. We're getting into the crunch time here. This should be pretty much our final time. Let's check in on our race leader. He'll cross the line. We'll get one more lap of action here. So I think Neil Kennedy has been saved by the bell, as our race leader will have one more lap to go.
Yep, so 5 more minutes, but we'll actually get an extra 4 laps because of the way that it works. But the more the better, and Dan Forster, might not agree with me there, to be honest, but he has taken the lead for the moment, and he has just got one more lap to see this one through. It does look like he's got the speed here. That's the one thing I will say, immediately noticeable, as Atkinson and Johnston battle it out here. Atkinson looks like he loses AM Championship lead at the moment to Adrian Hadfield, who's redeemed himself thoroughly in this race. Not that he had a particularly bad round at the Nordschleife, he just lost the championship lead to Atkinson in the second race, but Atkinson's going to lose that championship lead right now as they go side by side over the line. I'm slightly concerned that the clock hasn't actually ticked to 0. It's just staying at number 1. I'm sure it will tick down to 0, and we'll get the checkered flag in a few moments' time for Scott McFall, but this is quite a battle. Johnson and Atkinson still can't quite decide who will finish 10th.
Yeah, these two are going to battle through, and this is the battle in for the AMs overall. So Hatfield trying to hold on here against Atkinson, who has been leading for a large majority, and we'll see how that goes. Our race leader is coming through the final corner here. Ewan, we'll see if this checks off the end of the race.
Yeah, it certainly will. The checkered flag flies. Scott McFall wins 17 seconds. It's dominance at the Circuit de Lédenon for Scott McFall, the Pro Championship leader, further extending his margin. And a battle for the ages down in Pro-Am leads Dan Forster to take the win. Into the final corner he goes to take that one. As meanwhile, the battle for 8th place involves the AM winner, bizarrely. There goes Dan Forster up over the rise for the final time to win in Pro-Am. And here comes Adrian Hadfield, not going to bother trying to overtake Rylands. He doesn't need to. He can enjoy a back-to-back victory here at round 4 for himself, and he can enjoy his new championship lead retained again after losing it last time out. Who's going to finish second? Will Atkinson limit the damage by holding off Johnston? I think the answer to that's going to be yes. Gets a better run around the outside, and he will just about hang on, although it's going to be a photo finish. Not quite. He's going to get through, and he will finish second.
Not by much, but he is going to have that there. As you see, the little time trying to find the run from Johnston, if he could find it. And tell you what, race 2 popped off there near the end, and everybody got very, very feisty. But Scott McFall, once he found the front, ran away with it. 17.3 seconds the gap. A big, big flex there from him to go through. But Forster and Kennedy trying and going and battling, and in the end it is Forster that gets ahead of Kennedy by just 7/10.
Yep, great race in Pro-Am especially. Scott Brown, by the way, didn't lose any places by going down the pit lane. I believe he ran out of fuel there and had to come into pit lane. No, I think he did his drive-through. We definitely saw him in pit lane, but he didn't stop, so
Yep.
Must have been a drive-through, although it's not showing that he went in pit lane at all anymore. But maybe he didn't do it at all. I don't really know. Maybe the timing screen was playing tricks on me slightly, but there is Scott McFall. He is the race winner, driving his way back to pit lane. Being very realistic and Mr. Realism, isn't he, by driving back to the pit lane and escaping back there instead of on the racetrack like everyone else. But there you go. He will continue on as we have a look at the race results, which show him again at the top of the tree. It's 17 seconds this time ahead of Ryan Dudley, who limits the damage, as does Dan Wareham. Dan Forster wins in Pro-Am ahead of Neil Kennedy, with Mark Brown, Adam McCain and Lee Rylands rounding up the Pro field. Adrian Hadfield is the AM winner by a sizable margin today, with Terry Atkinson rounding out the top 10, having just held on ahead of John Johnston. Scott Brown finishes in 12th place, just over a minute back, with Anthony Jones in 13th. Peter Duke, Shane Bellinger rounded out those that finished the race. Tim Walters and Scott Bell didn't. John Kenny never started. Well, that was an interesting and exciting couple of races, I've got to say. There were moments of dips of action for sure, but for the most part, it was absolutely action-packed and thoroughly enjoyable to watch all over again. And that was quite an experience. Dominance for Scott McFall and Adrian Hadfield in the Pro and Am classes, but in Pro Am, it was very exciting indeed, especially in that second race. There was plenty of action to watch during that race.
Yeah, the second race did not disappoint. The first race did not disappoint. And overall, I think it was a very, very exciting race to watch. It was great to see these drivers tackle a very challenging hilly circuit here in France. And, it goes to show that the GR86 is probably one of the most exciting cars that there is. I enjoyed that a lot, and it makes me want to kind of get into a GR86 after this is over. I want to go and just kind of run through and see what I can get myself into with it here.
I don't want to drive this car, but I will keep watching it because I do enjoy watching the racing that it produces, even if I really dislike driving it. Let's have a quick chat to some of the drivers involved, including Dan Forster, who joins us now. Welcome in, Dan. Good to have you with us. Race 2 winner, just about ahead of Neil Kennedy. I mean, it was a race of complete rises and falls for everybody. You were leading at a stage by quite some distance, made a spin, had to fight your way back past Scott Brown again, who made contact with Dan Wareham and dropped a bit further back. How was that race for you overall with all of the things that it threw at you?
Yeah, well, I'm very sweaty, put it that way. I mean, I was surprised to get away from whatever happened behind me at the beginning. I was expected to be right from the start, having people chasing me down because obviously the lot faster guys are right there. But I don't know what happened. I was just thanking my lucky stars that I got away ahead, and then, I made a mistake in a place where I never normally do, and I lost a couple of positions there and just had to fight like crazy to try and get it back. And I'm normally a bit more of a cautious driver, but just with the track conditions allowing, needing us to do much more aggressive driving to keep the lap times up, then we just had to go for it. And I like I say, I'd like to look at the replays and see what happens, but hopefully it was reasonably clean racing, and we just went for it and had to do what we needed to do.
I'd say it was clean from where we were sat. It was certainly enjoyable racing to watch. But how are you feeling just recovering from that spin? We were just watching a replay of it there on the stream again there. I mean, you must have been, I said at the time, you must be absolutely livid with yourself. How were you feeling?
Yeah, I was very annoyed. I mean, that's just that one off-camber part of the track where you can just lose grip. If you come on the gas too quickly, just as it comes round the corner and down the hill, you can just... That's what I did. I just came around on the curb, gas too quick, too much, rather than gradual, and just span it. And I was annoyed with myself because I knew that I got quite a good lead, and I was thinking if I can just hold this, then I've got a good chance of being at least up there. I don't think I could compete with the likes of the fastest guys, but it's just a matter of holding on to what you can. And it was very disappointing for me to spin there, but I had to try and come back from it and see what I could make of it.
You certainly made a lot of it by winning the race. Is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to before we let you go?
Well, just thanks to everybody for arranging it, you guys for doing the broadcast and the sponsors, and my wife for letting me get in the rig every Sunday night and sweat a lot while I race.
It is warm at the minute. That's certainly for sure. We're feeling that a bit too. Although we're not doing any exercise, so I can imagine it's even worse for you at the moment driving. But there you go. Dan, congratulations on the race 2 victory tonight, and thanks for coming to chat to us as well.
Thanks very much. Cheers, gents.
Thanks very much, Dan Forster, there, the winner of race 2 tonight at Lédenon in the Pro Am class. Well, Brad, I think that's just about going to do it for us tonight. Nice to hear from Dan there. A bit of an insight into the racing. He was, speculating a little bit about how clean it was and hoping that it was clean. I would say that it certainly was. It was certainly a fun race to watch in Pro Am, especially.
Yeah, it was fun to watch the races all the way overall, and I'm glad that we didn't see any of class play. So sometimes you see drivers will see, the car around them, behind them, ahead of them isn't the same class, and they won't battle as hard. But I didn't see that at all. The drivers were very, very feisty. They were looking for overall runs, and well, it was enjoyable to watch. It kept things very fun, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I certainly did as well. A big thanks again to everybody who has joined. Oh, Adrian Hadfield is now waiting for us, so I'll just... there we go. Just bring him in quickly as well. Adrian, welcome in. Good to have you with us after a double victory for yourself tonight. How did you find it out there?
hard track, but yeah, short practice does help.
I mean, yeah, certainly does. It certainly paid off for you today, if that is indeed the case. How much experience prior to that practice did you actually have with this circuit?
I had a couple of hours midweek. Did an official PCC, and then I've had about an hour today. So, yeah, probably about 3 hours.
It's not a lot of practice, to be fair, for you to be on the speed that you were. How are you feeling about the rest of the season now, looking ahead? 5 rounds to go, and you'll be in the championship lead after tonight.
Yeah, I'm coming up to my drop weeks, though. So I'm here next week and then got 2 weeks away. So I have to see when I get back from my holidays.
Absolutely. Well, we hope it's a good week for yourself next week. Is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to while you're here before we let you go?
Just obviously thank John for putting this really good group together.
Absolutely. It's certainly been great to be a part of this league for the first time, and well organised as it is by John. So a big thanks to him as well. Congratulations, Adrian, on a couple of wins tonight for yourself, and thanks for coming to chat to us too.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adrian Hadfield there, the AM winner tonight from a couple of races. Well, that is now going to do it for us here tonight in the TH Jordan GR86 series by the Tanso Racing Group. It's been a pleasure to be along once again here tonight for this championship. It's always a pleasure. In fact, it's always such great racing. A big thanks to all the sponsors that make it possible, like TH Jordan, who I've already mentioned, Revive as well, and also at clarkstjames.com as well. All of the links, by the way, to all the sponsors you can find in the description of the YouTube video or stream if you're watching this live, or video if you're watching it on demand. So please go down into the description and check them out. That's it from us, though. I've been Ewan O'Leary alongside Bradley Dalton, and until we see you again in 1 week's time for round 5 of this championship, which will come from Motorland Aragon over in Spain, it's goodbye for now.